HMP Bedford is a place where failure has become routine. Behind its Victorian walls, men are left to rot in a system so dysfunctional that even its own leaders seem too exhausted to fight back. In theory, this local prison in Bedfordshire should be a gateway to rehabilitation and release, but the latest independent review of progress shows a place in permanent crisis, repeating its own mistakes like a broken record. When you cross the threshold of Bedford, you feel the collapse straight away. Cells caked in grime, toilets leaking, windows smashed and left unrepaired for months. Staff shortages mean prisoners are locked up for 22 hours a day in conditions unfit for animals, let alone human beings. Men pacing tiny cells, broken by boredom and neglect, their minds deteriorating with every wasted day. The regime is so threadbare it barely exists. Inspectors found education programs reduced to worthless paper exercises with no consistency or meaningful teaching. Workshops sat empty. There was no timetable prisoners could trust, no routine, no structure, no purpose. Officers too overwhelmed or burned out to care just shuffle the paperwork and try to keep a lid on violence. And violence is everywhere. Prisoners settle scores with sharpened bits of plastic or makeshift batons. Debt from drug-dealing spirals into attacks and intimidation. Younger prisoners live in fear of the older, more hardened men. There is no genuine safety here, only a thin, desperate order imposed by sporadic lockdowns. Mental health provision is in tatters. Men with psychosis or suicidal thoughts are left alone for hours, their cries echoing off the crumbling walls. Staff can't keep up. ACCT, suicide monitoring, processes are chaotic, with risk plans barely reviewed, if they exist at all. One man waited weeks to see a mental health nurse after cutting himself, left to stew in his own trauma while staff fought to cover the next emergency. Drugs flood in constantly. The prison's drug strategy is nothing more than a wish list, ignored by the unstoppable flow of spice and heroin smuggled inside. Drones drop off packages without serious challenge. Pigeons have even been observed carrying wraps of drugs in their wings. Testing rates are low, results delayed, and prisoners know it. They're used with impunity, leaving the jail fogged in the smell of spice and burning foil. HMP Bedford's residential wings are a disgrace. Toilets overflow for days without repair. Clean bedding is rationed. Cockroaches climb over men sleeping on torn mattresses. Food is served cold, portions too small, and far too many prisoners end up hungry. Showers rarely work properly. In some cells, windows are so broken that winter winds howl through, making the place feel more like a ruin than a state-run prison. One of the most disturbing realities is how the system treats young and newly received prisoners. Many are crammed onto the worst wings with barely a chance to settle. Induction is a farce, a rushed booklet, a confused briefing, then straight to a locked cell. No time to understand the rules, no time to grasp the opportunities, assuming there are any opportunities at all. Staff, for their part, are broken too. Many are new, poorly trained, and terrified. Some cannot even identify the most basic safeguarding concerns. Others are so jaded they no longer even try. Constant resignations mean that every day is firefighting, with no room for progress. Senior leaders talk of action plans and turnarounds, but these mean nothing on the floor of the landings, where men scream behind their doors and violence goes unchallenged. Resettlement is a sick joke. Nearly half of Bedford's prisoners leave with no accommodation to go to, no education completed, no drug treatment finished. Sentence plans are missing or out of date, and many men don't even know who their probation officer is. Release day comes, and they walk out with £46 in their pocket, straight back to the streets, straight back to the chaos. Inspectors found only scraps of hope. A few dedicated staff trying to run education classes against impossible odds. A mental health nurse desperately trying to do one-to-one sessions in a corridor. An officer who still believes things can get better. But these bright spots are suffocated under a mountain of neglect, mismanagement, and political indifference. In the end, HMP Bedford is a mirror held up to a broken prison system. It is what happens when society pretends it can throw people away. It is what happens when budgets are cut, staff are drained, and the idea of rehabilitation becomes nothing more than a slogan on a government press release. Now ask yourself, why do we keep packing human beings into crumbling cages with no hope and no help? How many more men will die by suicide or overdose before someone takes real action? And how long can Bedford keep pretending it is a prison when all it really is a warehouse of despair? Let us know what you think, because if this is justice, then what comes next? Here's a clearer, more polished and more in-depth rewrite of your text. A young female prison officer has shared her experiences of working in a male prison to mark International Women's Day, hoping to inspire more women to consider the career. Alicia Hall, 24, is a prison officer at HMP Bedford, a Category B resettlement prison holding around 400 men aged 18 and over. Alicia acknowledges that her role can sometimes be daunting, but she insists there are far more positive aspects to the job and is encouraging other young women not to be deterred from joining the prison service. Alicia began her career at just 19 after studying public services in college with an initial plan to become a police officer. However, while researching the prison service as part of her coursework, she became fascinated with the career opportunities it offered and decided to apply. My dad was very supportive, especially because he comes from a military background, she explained. My mum needed a bit more convincing that I would be safe, but my whole family have backed me all the way. She recalled that her college peers doubted she would last in such a challenging job, but that only spurred her on. I lost my brother to suicide when I was younger and have been through tough times growing up, she said. That made me even more determined to succeed, not just for me, but for him too. Outside of her role in the prison, Alicia lives in Hertfordshire and continues to volunteer as a leader with the 17th St Albans Scout Group, where she was once a member herself. She credits those years in scouting with developing crucial skills for her job. I learned how to connect with different people through being a scout leader, she said. That experience has been really valuable for communicating and building relationships with prisoners. It can feel quite daunting at first, but you develop resilience quickly. The training is excellent and it prepares you for handling difficult situations. I've had tough moments, but you learn to cope. Alicia is ambitious about her future, with her sights set on a supervisory or specialist role. There are so many opportunities in the prison service, she explained. I think it's time for me to progress. She draws particular inspiration from the governor of HMP Bedford, Ali, who is a woman who has worked her way up through the ranks and serves as a role model for other female staff. Alicia's message to young women who might doubt whether they can handle the job is clear. This job isn't what you always see in the media, she said. Of course, there are difficult days, but the positives far outweigh them. Just because you're a young woman doesn't mean you can't do well. In fact, I've seen so many succeed. There's brilliant guidance and support all around you, so don't be put off. A notorious repeat offender who left a trail of destruction at HMP Bedford and violently attacked a prison officer has been sentenced to nearly a decade behind bars. Anthony Spaulding, 31, of no fixed address, wreaked havoc inside the prison while on remand for an unrelated offence, causing more than £200,000 worth of damage to one of its wings. Appearing at Luton Crown Court, Spaulding pleaded guilty to a catalogue of crimes, criminal damage and assault on prison staff at HMP Bedford, in addition to 3 counts of robbery and a burglary across Dunstable, Houghton Regis and Luton in 2024. His total sentence amounts to 9 years and 6 months, broken down as follows: 5 years for the large-scale destruction he caused inside the prison, 18 months consecutively for assaulting a prison officer during the rampage, 3 years consecutively for burglary, 2 years and 5 months concurrently for 2 of the robberies, 2 years and 3 months concurrently for a third robbery. Detective Inspector Ian Holden of the Bedfordshire Police Criminal Investigation Team, which led the inquiry into Spaulding's prison rampage, welcomed the sentence. Mr. Spaulding showed extremely violent, reckless and dangerous behaviour, inflicting serious damage on the prison environment and leaving a member of staff injured. This kind of lawlessness has no place in our county, and we will relentlessly pursue offenders who pose a threat to public safety. Bedfordshire Police stressed that any attacks on public servants, especially within prisons, will be met with the full weight of the law. Here's a more polished, detailed, and compelling rewrite of your piece, retaining all the important facts, but giving it more depth and flow. One of the UK's youngest female prison officers has opened up about the realities of managing male prisoners twice my age and a foot or two taller than me, as she marks her third year working on the front line at HMP Bedford. Emily, 22, began her role at the men's category B prison when she was just 20 years old, making her the youngest female officer on site at the time. Despite the challenges of her high-pressure environment, Emily says she has developed remarkable confidence, resilience, and strength through the job. Armed with a degree in history, Emily chose an unconventional path after graduating, enrolling in the Unlocked Graduate Scheme in 2021. She entered a world where every day can bring confrontation, tension, or even violence, but where she also sees people at their most vulnerable and human. Some days it feels like inmates are screaming and shouting at you constantly, and it really does test you, she admitted. I was warned before I started that it was a sink or swim job, and that's exactly what it is. It takes confidence, especially as a young woman, to tell grown men twice your age what they can and cannot do. Emily recalled one of her toughest moments was breaking the news to an entire prison wing that their family visits had been cancelled at short notice due to an unforeseen issue. It was emotionally draining, she said. Visits are so important for them, and delivering that kind of news was incredibly difficult. There was a lot of anger and sadness. Some inmates even self-harmed over it. You end up bearing the emotional brunt of their frustration because, realistically, officers are often the only ones they can release those emotions on. Emily, who works mainly with prisoners awaiting sentencing, said that rude or sexist comments are part of the reality in a male jail, but she felt fully prepared to deal with them thanks to her training. At the start, no one, staff or prisoners, knows you, so you have to establish yourself before you can build any rapport, she explained. I came in with 3 other women, but I was the youngest. I was surprised by how confident I was, but I knew I had to be. Once you set your standards and stick to them, you gain respect. To build connections, Emily talks with inmates about everyday interests such as movies and video games. Your most powerful tool is your voice, she said. I know I deserve as much respect as any other officer. Once you show consistency and fairness, the rude comments tend to stop. She acknowledges that violence is an unfortunate reality, but praised the strong support network among staff. When incidents happen, the whole team backs each other up. You see prisoners at their most human, and sometimes they even want to talk about what happened afterwards. You realize you're helping people who might never have had that kind of conversation before. Emily believes the work is transformative, not just for prisoners, but for herself. It's taught me to see a completely different side to the world, and nothing else compares to that, she reflected. It's made me stronger, more confident, and more resilient than I ever thought I could be. For Emily, the good moments far outweigh the bad. She described how a prisoner recently gave every officer on a wing a handwritten thank you card as he was released. My card said I was wise and emotionally intelligent beyond my years, Emily shared. He could see I was young, but still respected how I understood his situation. Things like that really give you a boost. We pin those cards up on a notice board in the staff room. When we have a bad day, we look at them to remind ourselves why we do this job. For Emily, small moments, like a prisoner saying they look forward to a one-to-one session, make everything worthwhile. We're not here to judge, she added. If someone is willing to work with us, they get the same respect back. When you start to see their mindsets change, it's amazing. That's what makes it all worth it.